Okay, guys, so let's start understanding why we need SQL, right? So one of the first reasons that I've highlighted here is creating a database. So let's say you have just purchased a database tool, right? Like MS Access, or you downloaded the free MySQL database. Now, if you want to create your own database and start storing information in it, the first thing you need to do is you need to create your database. So that's what you will do, and you will need to write an SQL statement for that. So create database and database name, right? So that's the first reason. Now the second reason, or the second use case, is you want to be able to define your data that's going to be stored in the database. When I say define, DDL actually stands for data definition language. What is meant by defining your data is that you need to define the names of the different structures that are going to be stored. What is the structure format? What are the attributes of the object? What are the data types? For example, let's take product as an example. So I want to store product information, right? I want to create a table called product, and it should have let's say 4 columns, right? Product ID, product name, product description, and a create date column, right? So these are the definitions that you have to write down in the SQL specific format, and then feed it into your database. So that's another reason you need DDL. So DDL also includes creating your functions, your users, and a lot of other things, which we are going to explore in this particular course. Okay. So what's the next use case? So the next use case is actually modifying. So when you want to modify, so let's say you want to modify your data, right? Modification also includes, although it's not so obvious, it also includes creating data, or inserting data, right? So you start inserting your product information. You are selling automobiles, paper, electronics, apparel, whatever, right? All those product information you are actually entering into the system, which is a part of your DML, and then you can also update it, right? So you can also change the definitions, you can change the values, or you can also delete those records. So all those things come under DML, or modification process. So DML stands for data modification language. Now the next use case is querying it, right? Obviously, if you don't query it, if you don't ask questions to your database system, you're not going to get an answer. And if you never intended to query the database, there's no point in storing it, and unless it's an archive which is just kept for just in case, or contingency kind of thing, right? So an active database is always queried, right? So here DQL means data query language. So you ask questions to your database. Give me a list of our products, give me all the total sales for this year, or give me all the sales where a certain product was not sold, or sold the max, things like that. Simple questions and complex questions. So all those things can be done in SQL. Now the control, DCL, as I'm mentioning here, DCL means data control language. This is used to manage permissions. So let's say I have a certain table or a view, or basically any object in the database that I've created, and I want to restrict access to it to a certain number of users, and I want to enable access to a certain number of users. So all this is done using DCL, or control DCL. So you basically say grant read on a particular object name to a particular username. So that's pretty much what the syntax looks like across different database tools. So we are going to explore some of those also in MySQL later in this course. The next use case is triggers. Now triggers are basically programs that are tied to a table, a database table, and to an event, and basically triggered by an event. So they can be triggered before the event or after the event. I think we also touched upon these triggers in one of our earlier lectures. So for example, let's say you are inserting email IDs into a table, right, into a table column. So, and I create a trigger that validates your email ID. So because we don't want any junk garbage values in that field, right? So what this trigger might do is before insert or before update, you validate the input value, right? and check if it conforms to a specific email ID format. For example, x@y.com, right? And there's a whole string pattern recognition thing that we need to do to ensure that to confirm or affirm that it's a valid email ID. So as a use case, as an example, I'm just talking about email IDs, but you could also enforce business rules with this and a lot of other things. So that's what triggers are, and you can write triggers using SQL. Basically, you write triggers using SQL or SQL syntax. Okay, so now here we have transactions, right? So transactions, by transactions, what it actually means, it's not about the money transactions that we normally do, right? Like give and take, right? That's not what this is about. So here, let's say you have 5 different steps. So you want to create a product, you want to create a sale, and you also want to update the inventory. So for example, if 5 items are sold, then those 5 items must be removed from the inventory table. So as an example, right? Now what if you update your sales table and add three sales of 3 products, but your update to the inventory where you need to delete the inventory by 3, right, that fails. So then your data becomes inconsistent. So it's like if you're balancing the debits and credits, if you increase the credit and you must change the debits also, if that doesn't happen, then your whole equation goes for a toss, right? So that's what this transaction control is all about. So in this, what you do is you specify different steps. Let's say there are 1, 2, 3 and 4 steps, right? So in transactions control, what we can do is that we can instruct the database to complete this entire set of instructions either fully or absolutely none. So it cannot be partially done. It cannot be partially done. It should be done in full or in none. So that's what is your transactions. So the other thing is that let's say you updated certain data, right? Now you made a mistake and you want to roll it back. You want to undo it. So roll back and commit. Commit is when you make a change and you want to persist those changes. So you do a commit. So all these things come under transactions, and those are also done using SQL statements or SQL contracts, right? So now I think I just drew something here. See here, what I'm mentioning here is actually administration. It's not clear because I just used that space to demonstrate the transaction thing. So administration, so when you talk about administration, you talk about user account management, password reset, table space management, a lot of other things that the DBA does. All of that is also done using SQL syntax. So that's it. And then the other thing that we should remember is that it's very important that SQL is not case sensitive. So your SQL commands or SQL syntax or SQL code is not case sensitive. It doesn't really matter if you write it in uppercase or lowercase or mix them. So they are going to be effective as they are. So let's just remember that, right? So this is about your use cases of SQL and why we need SQL. So I hope you understood the purpose of having SQL. It can do so many different things that in the beginning it might look a little bit, if not intimidating, definitely confusing, because you have something like DML, DDL, DQL, DCL, and you have triggers and this and that and all. But as and when you start getting your feet wet with hands-on exercises, you will be able to appreciate these concepts better. All right, so thank you.